All right, students, happy Monday. Welcome to a new week and a new subject matter. This week, we will be touring the Bill of Rights as well as a handful of other amendments to get ready for a new project starting next week. So here we are. We are going to be filling in our notes. So on your guided notes, the first thing you need to write down where it says the Bill of Rights at the top of the first slide, you need to fill in the box. The first thing you need to write is that the Bill of Rights are, in fact, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Quick review: an amendment is either a change or an addition to the Constitution. In this case, there are 10 additions. Okay? All right, if you need to pause and fill that in, please do so. Moving on, why did the founders need to pass the Bill of Rights so soon after, actually even really before the Constitution was fully ratified? I want you to think of the Bill of Rights as a bargaining chip. They used the Bill of Rights, this list of 10 items, to get the Constitution signed. They needed to get the Constitution ratified, remember, by 9 out of 13 states. So they used these extra add-ons to get many of those states to sign. The second reason was because they wanted to make sure in the Constitution it very clearly said that people would be protected from a potentially abusive government. So again, the second reason is because they wanted to make sure that they would avoid another situation like they had with Great Britain with the king. And the third reason that they wanted to pass the Bill of Rights is because they wanted to incorporate a lot of those Enlightenment ideas about rights, including natural rights to life, liberty, and property, that were not yet mentioned in the Constitution. In many ways, a lot of those rights were sort of mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, but they weren't in the Constitution. And a lot of the founders thought, if we don't write them down now, how can we protect them? So again, those are the three items here. And I want you to remember, this was a long time ago, but there were two sort of growing factions of people at the founding, at the actual Constitutional Convention, that were fighting to either get this document signed or not. And as I've mentioned multiple times, many of the people in the room were really not that confident. So it was really a battle to try to get this thing through. Now on your notes, this is what you should have completed so far. And then at the bottom, there's this section that says key. We're going to pick 3 colors here. We're going to use this a little bit later, but just cue us up since I'm trying to go in order today. The first section, individual freedoms, we're going to make that color pink. The second section, limits on government, we're going to make that blue. So if you want to fill in those boxes with these colors. And then the third section, we're going to fill in green. Those will come in handy later as we start to organize the Bill of Rights into categories. Okay, so a quick history lesson. We learned about these groups of people before, a long time ago actually. What you need to know is at the founding, at the time the Constitutional Convention happened, there were growing political parties just like there are today. And they weren't Republican or Democrat, they were Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Okay, and the Federalist Party really wanted a powerful federal government. This included people like Alexander Hamilton. And they favored the ratification of the Constitution, but they did not think that we needed to add these Bill of Rights since the government's power was already limited by the Constitution. Think about how the 3 branches of government work. On the other end of things, we have this anti-federalist party led by people like Thomas Jefferson, who wanted a weak federal government because they didn't trust the federal government. They didn't want it to be another tyranny, a tyrant, a king. And they opposed the ratification of the Constitution, and they said, we will sign this if you add the Bill of Rights. Now, when we talk about political parties, we talk about feuding groups of people here with political ideologies. A quick little side note, it really was not that peaceful of a battle trying to get these political parties to work together. And so in many ways, the year 2020 and 2021 is no different than the year 1798. In fact, I'd argue that in 1798, things got a little bit worse. The caption says, this cartoon shows 2 members of Congress resorting to physical violence to resolve a political dispute in 1798, during a period of particular discord between the 2 primary political factions, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So Matthew Lyon who was an anti-federalist on the left. This is him, pretty angry guy. While the Federalist, his name's Roger Griswold, is doing the same on the right. If you look a little closer, there's like little smoke drawings. This is obviously not a historically accurate drawing. It's not a photograph. But this is actually like a fire poker. So it was really hot too. Now, okay, yes, obviously we don't want our politicians fighting with each other on the floor of Congress. But even more than that, we don't want everybody around then laughing at them like a mob and egging them on. This guy just looks like overjoyed, and I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Speaker of the House. So when I think about politics, it's important to remember that you have to compare different eras. Okay, side note. So let's talk about the actual Bill of Rights. Many of these you know, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through here, and yes, you are going to have to fill in the column to the right, described as in your own words. Okay, we're just doing an overview here. We are not diving into them yet, but we will. So the First Amendment, I know you've heard of this before. It has 5 parts. Okay, to the left, this is the actual text of the First Amendment, and so to the right, I'm going to give you an abbreviated version. So it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Oop, that happened really fast. So there are 5 things protected in this amendment. The first is religion, freedom of religion. The second is speech. The third is the press. Fourth is assembly, or the right to protest. And fifth is the right to petition. Remember about the Revolutionary War and where our country literally came from. It was from a giant protest. So this was obviously something that was sort of at the heart of the American identity at our founding, and still to this day is very important. There are 5 elements to this pretty large amendment here, so yes, I want you to write down all 5. Religion, speech, the press, assembly, and petition. Okay, the Second Amendment. You know this one. It's the right to bear arms, or guns, quite literally. The Third Amendment is one that is largely historical, not too applicable to this day, but it is still protected if it ever needs to be used again. And it was a direct contrast with something called the Quartering Act that happened during the Revolutionary War. So you might remember this, yes? The British actually forced colonists to house soldiers in their homes as a way to sort of manage the chaos that was happening prior to the Revolution, as well as watch over the colonists and prevent any sort of sneaky types of activity. So in response, they put this in the Bill of Rights. It's an anti-quartering act. You cannot be forced to house soldiers during peacetime. So again, I want you to write in all 3 of these. Okay, the Fourth Amendment, and by the way, here are those Roman numerals again, right? The Fourth Amendment is a little bit different, and it has to do with you being accused of a crime if that were to ever happen. The first part of this is that police must have a warrant to search a person's home. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Remember John Locke's right to property. This is a direct correlation to that. Again, the police must have a warrant. And the second element here is that a judge, in order to issue said warrant, needs to have probable cause or reasonable cause. They can't just say, Mrs. Lopez, you look suspicious. We're going to search your house. They need to have some sort of evidence to actually put that warrant into place. There has to be some check on the power of the judges. Okay, the next one is a pretty big one. It has 3 elements to it, 3 parts. It says, no person shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. Whoa, I thought Jeopardy was a game. Here, Jeopardy is actually referring to a legal philosophy called double jeopardy, meaning that you cannot be tried twice for the same crime. The second is that you have a right to remain silent. If you've heard of that before, maybe from a crime show or I don't know where, anywhere, the pleading the fifth, This idea that you don't have to answer questions that you feel might incriminate you. You're allowed to remain silent. And number 3, law enforcement must follow due process. They must do things by the book. And this has been outlined and enforced over the past 200 years of our history, really. It has changed a bit as time has gone on. But the idea is just because you're accused of a crime, you can't be presumed to be guilty right off the bat. They have to go through the steps in order to prove guilt. All right, the 6th Amendment then is the right to a list of things. And I sort of put them in bold here, these tougher words. The first is that you have the right to a speedy and fair trial, meaning that they have to hold your trial soon after you had been accused of a crime. The second is that you have the right to an impartial jury. Impartial means that the jury members are unbiased. Next, you have the right to face your accusers. The people who actually charged you with the crime are supposed to be a part of the process as well. In other words, you can't just accuse someone of a crime and then sort of run away from the issue. And next, you have the right to a lawyer. In the actual phrase, they refer to counsel. And this is all specific to criminal cases. Okay, moving right along. So again, if you want to pause this video at any time because I'm moving too fast, that is totally okay. And yes, we are jotting down quite a few things today. I understand that, but I am going to move quickly through the video. All right, so the 7th Amendment here is another one that has to do with the rights afforded to people who have been accused of a crime. The 7th Amendment, by the way, is one that I don't typically talk about too much because it's not so applicable in modern day. But here's the really simple explanation. You have the right to a trial by jury, especially if it's a big case. In other words, big, they say here, something like more than $20. The idea that in a court of law, you have the right to have jurors assess your guilt as opposed to just a judge, meaning your peers, people who are just like you and I, citizens. Okay, last 3 here, almost done. The 8th Amendment prevents the government from using something called excessive bail. It says that people have the right to reasonable bail, meaning the money paid to release a prisoner for nonviolent crimes. And this is probably the most important part of the 8th Amendment here, no cruel or unusual punishment. Okay, the last 2 are short and sweet. The 9th Amendment is sort of a broad strokes amendment, meaning it applies to so many things, but super simple. They said that citizens have rights beyond the Constitution and they cannot be taken away. In other words, just because the founders may have forgotten to put it down in writing in that really hot summer of 1787 and then afterwards when they were working on the Bill of Rights, just because they may have forgotten to jot it down doesn't mean that the citizens do not get that right. And it can be added to and adjusted as time goes on, usually through either Supreme Court cases or constitutional amendments. Then the last amendment, you guys already know. It's the Elastic Clause. Powers not given to the federal government are given to the states. Remember, it's a loophole. It extends the powers of the states. This made those anti-federalists really happy. Okay, so there's a lot of ideas in here, and we're going to break it down. It is totally cool if only 50% of this is jiving right now and making sense, okay? The first thing we're going to do to break it down right now is to organize these amendments into categories. So remember when I had you guys fill in those colors on the first slide. Each amendment can fit into one of these 3 categories, so we're going to color code it with these little boxes. The first amendment has to do with individual freedoms, which is pink. So I want you to fill in that box there, pink. The Second Amendment as well has to do with individual freedoms, and so does the Third Amendment. So now think about the Fourth Amendment. Does this have to do with individual freedoms, limits on government, or rights of the accused? It has to do with the rights of the accused, so it's green. Same with the Fifth Amendment. the Sixth Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment. And then finally, the last one has to do with the limits on the federal government. So blue, as well as the 10th Amendment, which gives the rights to the states, that would be blue as well. So again, we can organize them into those three categories. So I know that was a lot of information. As you were taking notes, you may have noticed that I highlighted some of these keywords in yellow. So the last thing you're going to do today is you're going to go to Schoology and take the Bill of Rights keywords matching practice. Tomorrow in class, we're going to look at examples of this. So we're actually going to look at real cases where these amendments have been used and apply our knowledge. Today was just an overview. So again, after taking these notes, I want you to go and take the practice test. You can take it as many times as you would like. It'll help you organize some of these key ideas. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.